Hi, I'm John with Orange ModWorks, and in this video we are going to install the core Strongarm / Disruptor Classic System Kit. So I'm going to do this installation with a Disruptor, and I have a Strongarm off to the side here. I can show you the differences. So first things first, remove all of your screws, including these two hidden screws down here, with your flathead screwdriver. If you have trouble splitting the shell, you can use, or with your Phillips head, sorry. If you have trouble splitting your shell, you can use a flathead to work along the seams. So once you have the shell open, you're going to remove your stock parts. I have already popped out the plunger and trigger catch, but I left this trigger in place. And you may be thinking that looks a lot like a Strongarm trigger. And it is. This is an old test trigger, and I wanted to go over the differences real quick between the Strongarm and the Disruptor triggers. So, a stock or a Strongarm trigger has these structures here and here that prevent it from being used in a Disruptor. But if you're handy with a Dremel and have a steady hand, you can grind out 1, 2, 3 support structures. So you end up with a trigger that looks like this, and then you can use it in a Disruptor. So moving on. Once your blaster looks like this and you have the trigger catch, and plunger rod removed, we can move on to installing the kit. So before we get our hands greasy with the plunger rod and everything, let's go ahead and install the foam seal. So I'm going to remove the cylinder, and just for good measure, I'm going to take out this front part, and dipping into the kit box, find the foam seal. Pop out the center and toss that center bit aside. Careful not to tear the seal, it's pretty thin in these edges here. And then carefully lift out your entire rotation mechanism and plunger body. Be really careful not to lose this spring here, or this coil spring. This one doesn't really come off, but this small spring here can pop off pretty easily. And as you can see from the factory, this is kind of off center. So I'm gonna just peel that off. Helps if you have fingernails. Try to get it off without leaving any of that glue behind, but if you do, it's fine. You don't really need to get all of the adhesive off for this to work. So line this up. It goes on like that. Okay. Peel the adhesive protector. Try not to get any grease on the adhesive, and drop it straight down. You can use the square opening where the air restrictor is to sort of line up your seal. So once we have that on, firmly press it down. All right, so we can put this piece back. So we have this post and this post. They match up with these hexagonal holes, like so. We're gonna hold off on putting the cylinder back because the plunger rod usually requires us to lift this out. All right, so grab your plunger rod assembly. It comes pre-assembled with a slant fire catch and spring. Take your O-ring and slide that on. Now you have a grease here. Puncture it with the cap. Actually, I already have an open one. Open that one. So this one has been punctured. And we are going to apply a thin coat of grease to the O-ring. From what I've seen, most Disruptors have a decent amount of grease inside of their plunger bodies already, so you don't need to put too much. And that is the only grease you need to apply for this mod. You don't need to put grease on any of the other components. And so we're gonna work the plunger head in and slide it in. Okay, so a lot of the times the spring will stick out. Just make sure it's past this wall here. So push this all the way in, line up these two pegs with these two holes, and that drops right in. If your spring is sticking out, you can just lift the plunger rod and push it in. Oh, one more thing. This little hooked piece on the slam fire catch is pointing down. If you close your blaster with the plunger rod upside down, your shell will close, but you won't be able to prime. So the orange logo is the top. You can see that orange logo right there. That is the top of the plunger rod. So let's pop that in. Make sure everything's good. Okay. So next, we have our trigger spring, trigger catch, the catch spring, and our T-pole. So the trigger will go in last, but you can go ahead and pop the spring over the little teeth so you don't lose it. And we'll go for the trigger catch. So these wings out here, they go outside of the blue portion of the shell, between the slide and the shell. Like so, just right in there like that. There is a small shelf here, kind of semicircular shelf, and this flat section, line that up with the hole in the catch. That is where your trigger catch spring will go. Like so. And we're going to hold off putting the spring in because it really tends to shoot out, even more so than in the strong arm. Okay, so this peg will go in the trigger slot here, and the spring lines up there, like that. When you pull the trigger, you can see your catch will move down. All right, take the trigger screw and screw down the trigger. So the T-pole, textured side up, fits into this slot, and it goes between the shell, between the slide and the shell. Well, once you do that, the blaster won't lie flat, so we'll sort of balance that in place. We'll put it in last, because the trigger catch spring needs to go up through this hole, kind of like this motion. Hold it down with your hand because it will pop out. So when you get to there, use your thumb and pop it in. This may take a couple tries, that's normal. It's kind of a tricky part, and it tends to want to lift the catch and shoot out the top. So from now on, I'm going to be holding this down. Put our dart tooth in place. Let's get the barrel and cylinder. Oh. All right, now let's get our T-pole and the other half of the shell. Well, keep wanting to put that T-pole on now. We'll hold off until the end because I am worried about losing this spring. So I'm going to keep holding this by the wing. I'm going to go in to tilt the back end of the shell in first to capture your trigger catch. That is the priority. And press it down and press it down gently. You shouldn't have to force anything. Sometimes the screws, if you've left them in your shell, will poke through and cause problems, but that's no big deal. All right, so from here, I'm just going to go ahead and tighten everything. Making sure it is actually, it's closed. Okay, now we can finally put in that T-pole, like that. And then the other half of the slide. Line it up. And close it down. And it's only held in by 3 screws. Okay, so now it's time to test prime. Couple things. You have now put a stronger spring and a thicker seal. So sometimes there's like a break-in period with these springs, and right now the spring is most likely, with that thicker seal, pushing the plunger body against the cylinder harder than it would normally be with a stock internals. So when we prime, oh, that was weird. Okay, so now it's primed. We're gonna pull the trigger. Okay, the cylinder turned. That's great. Sometimes you'll fire and the cylinder won't turn. It will simply turn when you go to prime again. And that may go away usually after 50 or so shots, everything gets broken in. But right now, with this blaster, everything is functioning as it should. There's that slam fire. That's really smooth, although I think slam fire isn't used very often with these heavier springs, but it does work. So for the T-pole, you can prime it like that. On the other side, underhand, and of course, straight over the top. Straight over the top would be my recommended way to prime this blaster with this part installed, because if you go from one side or the other, it cants this to one side or the other. So with this, it gets a straight back motion and applies even force to little wings on the plunger rod on the slam fire catch. So that is the Disruptor kit, and let's take a quick peek at a Strongarm that has the same kit installed. So with the Strongarm, everything is exactly the same. The trigger is different, but this entire sort of internal mechanism is identical. Same springs that you don't want to lose. Very similar cylinder setup, except on the Strongarm, of course, the cylinder rotates out for loading. Different accessory tooth. This one has a spring and can shoot off if you're not careful. In the back, the catch, the trigger system, everything is the same. However, there is no place to put the T-handle. The T-handle is only for the Disruptor. The Strongarm's slide, while it does have a small slot, there's not enough room between the slide and the rest of the blaster to fit anything. And of course, there's this lanyard loop thing in the way. So that is how to install the Strongarm / Disruptor Core Series kit. Thanks for watching.